Superman Unlimited issue 2, Dan Slott writing with RAFAEL Albuquerque on the art. So, issue 1 of this was pretty solid, honestly, given all the expectations of Dan Slott coming on board, and you know what I vaguely remember from reading some of his Spider-Man back in the day. Sadly, I do think this is a weaker issue and does remind me of how his Spider-Man used to read. And it's kind of the opposite of what I was saying about Detective Comics, in that there isn't that much of a flow to this. It kind of feels awkwardly paced, and like the ending in particular really made me feel that way. Where like the last page with I need to go at the end of the book to see it, but at the end of the issue, like there's like a little moment with Clark and Jack Ryder like in a bar, and Clark says something which makes Jack Ryder laugh, and it's kind of played off as the end of the scene, and it just goes to like the epilogue page, which is teasing like a villain for next time, and it just didn't feel like the end of something to me. It felt like it did not feel like the end of a scene, and it's just there's just little things like that throughout, which I think made this feel a lot more stilted compared to the first issue, and you know, it's not that I didn't like the book. Like, I still think the story, for the most part, and what they're doing with the concepts is still pretty interesting. But it definitely felt a bit more, from what I remember from reading some of his Spider-Man, it reminded me more of how Dan Slott's writing in that read, which is that it doesn't have the greatest flow in the world and the greatest structure in the world. So I don't know how you feel. How did you feel about this issue?
So I like it, but I feel like Slott's got a lot of ideas and not a lot of space to put them in. So he's just throwing a whole bunch of stuff out there, and I'm sure eventually it'll come together. Because there's ideas that I do like. I just how many months was Clark in that coma? I know they said in here, but I read this first this week.
It was like 3, I think, something like that.
Yeah, so like for over 3 months, this entire nation has built itself up out of kryptonite and stuff, and they have their own daily planet globe that's going up, right? Which that's another idea that the Galaxy Broadcasting has put these daily planet globes in all these major cities as like a symbol of the news and whatever, and they're getting their own made completely out of kryptonite. And I have a lot of questions about this country, city, whatever it is, city state, and how it's been built up so big in those 3 months that Clark was gone.
I wouldn't worry about that, because they're clearly going to focus on this country and, like, you know, what it is and how this guy kind of like built it up out of the crypt. Like, I feel like this is stuff that they're going to be exploring.
Of course, and that's the stuff that the ideas that he has, that they're going out there, and I'm glad that I have those questions. But then, you know, to throw the creeper in here, it feels like the pacing completely changes. Yeah, right? We're getting into all this stuff we're getting all this stuff with Lois asking questions and whatever, and then we get to Jack Ryder and his whole thing, and you know, if Slott was trying to say a thing about the difference in the news and the type of news that Ryder gives, which is like this tabloidy, talking head, pointed, you know, kind of what we're used to in the news nowadays, opinion masquerading as fact type stuff. But I don't feel like that's what we're getting. Right, it's just an excuse to get the creeper in here.
Well, I don't know. It's hard to say yet, because we don't really know where he's going with it. I will say, like, transitioning from Lois in this country, you know, where there's an attack, and we get to see how like this leader, who's been referred to as the Kryptonite King by his people. So there's a bit of a question of like, is he kind of like, you know, is he taking over this country in a way where he's gotten rid of democracy? Is there more stuff going on here? He kind of shrugs it off as like, oh no, it's just a nickname, it doesn't mean anything. But he's got these knights that are wearing kryptonite armor that take on these like terrorists that try and attack. So that's the whole thing that plays out. And you know, I did feel it when we transitioned from that to like the like, oh, Jack Ryder's doing his like weird like radio talk show thing, and he's interviewing this farmer who thinks that kryptonite in the water supply has led to changes in her two-headed goats, which, you know, and they do make a point here of like saying something to think about news and fact checking, because the whole bit here is that Clark like kind of interrupts the show because Daily Planet now own this you know, entire broadcast thing. Clark comes in and says, "Hey, just to do some like fact checking mid thing here. Those goats are easily 2 years old, and the kryptonite's only been around for 3 months, so like they couldn't possibly be affected by that." And then the lady reveals that she wasn't claiming that the goats became two-headed because of the kryptonite. They were always a two-headed goat. Their eyes are just a bit more green because of the kryptonite, and that's the bit. It's it's fine. Like I think the point gets across. I did think that the Creeper subplot, because Jack Ryder becomes Creeper and ends up like getting involved in the other stuff that happens in the next scene. That stuff felt like, okay, I guess we're doing this now, and I get that you're not going to introduce Jack Ryder and not do Creeper stuff, otherwise what's the point? But I did feel like it was very suddenly where we're doing this whole like Creeper like element to this, when I don't think he was teased in the first dish. Maybe he was. Maybe there was a small tease of him. I don't remember. But the whole thing here is that these villains are robbing a bank and they're prepared with kryptonite bullets when Superman shows up. So they shoot him a couple times. I did like the little bit of writing here where Superman says that, yeah, obviously he could still maybe dodge the kryptonite bullets, but the problem is that as soon as the bullet leaves the chamber, he's already feeling the effect of the kryptonite, and it does kind of make it tough for him to do so. I like that detail. I also like the detail that the kryptonite bullets are very, very expensive, so they only shoot him with a couple, and then they pull out kryptonite brass knuckles. Well, they're not brass, but you know what I mean. But, a kryptonite
knuckle
knife.
Duster, if you will.
Yes.
Also, the fact that Clark is so used to making himself a target that just when the guns bolt, he makes himself bigger, right? Because he doesn't want the bullets to go into the crowd. Right?
Yeah.
They're always aiming at him. So I did like that Slott had added some of that type of stuff in.
No, there's good details kind of dispersed in there for sure. And then so obviously the cliffhanger last time, which up to this point in the book hadn't really addressed yet, which was what was that weird gold look that Superman had at the end of the first issue? Yeah. What were they teasing there? So it turns out this is kind of like a new power that's cropped up for some reason, where if he's exposed to kryptonite for a few minutes, right, or whatever it is, however long it takes to trigger it, all of the energy in his body, all of the solar energy basically forms this gold shield, but it will only last for about 3 minutes. Right? 200 seconds was the exact time I think they gave. Yep. Because it flashes back to them talking about it at the end of last issue.
On the Watchtower.
Yeah. So we get this sort of definition here of how this works. So I do appreciate that there is like limitations to this. It's not just like he's just fine for forever. In fact, not only is he not just fine forever because he's got this gold like solar shield that he now employs. I do like that after the shield is gone, after those 3 or so minutes, he's completely vulnerable because all of his powers are gone. I thought that was an interesting little thing to throw in because it's like, okay, it's kind of like, in fact, actually, there's something I want to complain about here, right? Because I was about to say it feels very video gamey, where you get invincibility for a minute, but then it goes away and you're more vulnerable.
Yep.
Superboy makes that reference, right? Connor makes a reference to this, which I thought was fine, right? I thought, when they're explaining to Clark how this works, what happens when everything runs out, and I'm out of juice. Connor says, then you need to collect another 100 gold rings. I thought that's a fine reference. It's a little pop culture reference, but it makes clear how this works, that he has to recharge with solar energy. The problem is that for some reason Dan Slott decided that he wanted to make 2 references in the same speech bubble, so he then does it again and references Mario in the same bubble.
Yep.
It's an equally fine reference, but there's absolutely no reason for 2 of them. It feels so clunky having both of them. So that really irked me and stood out to me.
It's pick one. It's a hat on a hat. Like we already got the point.
Yeah.
Right. So
it's indulgent, I guess. It's just indulgent.
Yeah, but I do like that they point out that it might be a mutation from his supernova, right? When he would, because same thing would happen. He would go do that supernova and go get overloaded, and then he would be vulnerable for a short time after. Because for the same reason, his cells would use up all the solar energy until he could absorb more. So, you know, the fact that they point that out, that it could be a mutation, we're not sure. We still got to track what exactly is going on.
Yeah, so yeah, we see him turn into, you know, gold and like take out the robbers quite quickly. And it runs out just as he finishes punching them, but there is the one super villain chick left who's ready to fight him again.
Out.
And he basically just like says, "Really, you're going to try this again?" He basically just bluffs, and she stands down because she thinks that he's still, you know, Superman or whatever. Yeah. However, Creeper inadvertently reveals to the world that he is vulnerable after this gold shield's been up, because he decides to shoot him with a pea shooter or whatever, like, you know, like when you shoot the straw thing at someone. And it you know, Superman reacts to it. He grabs his neck and goes ow when it hits him. And it just so happens that some vlogger, some Instagram, TikTok person is filming with their phone and basically just deduces, hey, I guess Superman's pretty weak and just as human as everyone else after that gold shield's been activated. So Creeper's like, oh no, I might be going to hell for that one, because he's inadvertently just told the entire world that there's going to be times now where Superman is completely vulnerable as anyone else. I mean, I did think his reaction to it was funny. So I'm curious what the end game is here with Creeper as like a recurring like supporting character, but it was definitely a clunky like insertion of him, I think, for the first half of this issue.
For sure. Him slinking away and the way that he does. I think Albuquerque does the facial expressions really well. But yeah. Yeah,
I mean, you know, I like, Albuquerque's art is obviously very good. It's very interesting a choice for Superman, I still think, because I don't know if it necessarily lends itself to Superman's kind of like vibe and style all the time. But I can't deny that the sequencing and the, you know, like you say, like Creeper slinking away the way he does, because he knows he's in trouble, is all very good and entertaining. So, So, anywho,
and well, I like the warmness of his colors, right? Because I usually associate Albuquerque with all the dark and the shadows and like the American Vampire stuff. But here at the bar, everything has like this warm glow washing over it. And we still get some purples and, you know, so some of those mixed in. But I will say, just like that whole vibe of this warm bar called the Bronze Swan, where the bartender's name is Kurt, as you know, got to be a reference to Kurt Swan, the famous Superman artist. It's something that I wouldn't expect out of Albuquerque, and he just nails it.
Yeah, you still see some classic Albuquerque colors though in those Creeper pages before. You know, when it's just Creeper,
for sure.
There's those cold palette where it's like, oh, this looks like it could just be a page from American Vampire. If you just put some fangs on him, it would look very American Vampire.
He is very Skinner-esque, right?
Yeah.
With the facial expressions. So.
Yeah. So the final page though, which is teasing some bigger stuff. You've got the leader of the country talking about his kryptonite and all the rest of it. Seemingly he's working with a new version of Toyman. That's what the final page is revealing. Also, that final joke that made Jack Ryder laugh is Clark does posit the kryptonite's worth more money than the gold they were stealing, so why not just go sell the kryptonite and not take the gold? But obviously, the idea that kryptonite for a villain is very useful because they can use that on Superman. So,
or any of the Kryptonians, right? Like, there's a bunch of them.
Yeah, because
Clark.
It looks like Toyman has been paid off with kryptonite bars here at the end of the issue. Just to point that
out. Also, Clark goes into the bar and orders the Clark Kent special, which is a gin and tonic. Hold the gin. So he says, "Type of maniac just drinks tonic water." Like, if I'm looking at Clark Kent and he's just drinking tonic water, I'm asking him what's up and if he's okay.
Yeah,
you know.
And I was just reminding myself. I was just reminding myself what the leader of the country was actually wanting Toyman to do. He wants Toyman to silence the people who are starting to question if they should be using kryptonite in the way it is. Like, because it is brought up at one point in the issue on the Jack Ryder show. Isn't kryptonite eventually dangerous to everyone? And yeah, like, and at least in the past, like, there's been a storyline where Lex got cancer because he was too exposed to kryptonite. At least in the animated shows, anyway. I don't know if that was ever in the comics, but it's definitely been something that's come up before. Is this idea that it is eventually harmful to humans in some way?
Yeah, kryptonite radiation still affects people. Like we've seen that in different things. So, and here the glow that's coming off of the suitcase is very Pulp Fiction-esque, right? So it seems like it's radiating something onto Toyman. Which is the doll version of Toyman, which I don't know if he's a robot or what. Like, I'm kind of unfamiliar.
Well, Toyman will be fine though, because he's not the one opening the case. He's using one of his toys to do it. So he's actually one of the few people who might not be making themselves sick. he's using an avatar, so he's fine. Anyway, so I mean, just like, I still kind of like the ideas that Slott's playing with here, and I'm still kind of into the overall like direction it's going in for now. But I did think this issue was a bit clunkier in its pacing. I thought the Jack Ryder kind of stuff felt like a weird kind of like insertion at the start. Obviously, by the time you get to the end, he's been kind of there the whole book, so it doesn't feel like weird anymore. But when it first cut to his radio show, and like, it wasn't just like because I thought it was going to be like, oh, it's going to be one page of like some world building, like he's going to mention some stuff about how kryptonite's being used, and we'll hear a couple of little bits of vanilla about the world right now. But instead it went on for a few pages, and we did the whole thing with the goats, and then Creeper comes into it like a few pages later, and I'm like, oh, we're really going heavy on Creeper in this story then. So yeah, we'll see. But this country that's built its entire place up out of kryptonite is an interesting concept, and be very curious to see what happens when something pops up where Superman might actually have to go there for some reason, and how he tries to like work around the obvious limitations that would come with.
Look, we know he still has the Superman robots, right? Just send them.
Maybe that's simple. I don't know.
Yeah, that's all.
All right, what are you rating Superman Unlimited?
I'm gonna go with a straight 7.
Yeah, that sounds a bit fair to me. There was a lot of interesting stuff here, but just a little clunkier in the execution. So 7 out of 10.